All right, everybody. Welcome back. It's me, your girl, Chrissy, back for another news roundup slash post GDC video. So why don't we start it right off with talking about GDC 2025? And I'm going to go straight over to the IATSE Instagram because I'd love to show you this picture. This picture is amazing. This is our organizing team with President of the IATSE, Matthew Loeb, joined by the local 16 members who make the GDC Awards happen every year on the GDC stage with our Game Worker logo up there. It's just chef's kiss. Beautiful. I am immensely proud to have had so much support from the local 16 members at GDC this year, but also for our president to have joined us there to check us out on the floor and to also see the work that we're doing and to interact with SAG AFTRA, because we did also do a lot of collaboration with SAG AFTRA this year. And it was just such a incredible, powerful moment and also week. I've never been more exhausted in my life. That's just what GDC does to you, I think. But it was a great time. But also, I was able to take President Loeb around the GDC floor to check out all the things that were happening, and a lot of the motion capture stuff. As we've talked about previously, we've organized with the 2K motion capture workers up in Petaluma, California, which is not too far from where GDC is held in San Francisco. Understanding motion capture technology and what is coming down the pike for AI and all sorts of other technology that affects game workers is really important for all of us to understand as we move forward into organizing in video games, but especially for our president, so that he can better advise us as well as membership on how to help folks in games form unions and also get better contracts. So it was really honestly like super cool and just an incredible experience to have him there, as well as to again see all the local 16 folks join us on the floor, stop by the booth, say hello, and also to talk to workers. So many of them were like, yeah, I was telling all the workers here, like, go check out that IATSE booth. Y'all want to know what a good union is? Go check out that one. So it was really cool to be there with President Loeb. So we also had our mixer with SAG AFTRA, which was super cool. I was talking a bit previously about Local 16, and I would like to, again, just huge shout out to Local 16. They were able to arrange for us to use their locals union hall. It is a Marine Firefighters Union hall. And every day the Marine firefighters show up to this building and get assigned jobs. It's basically like a hiring hall. So the jobs come in, the workers hang out, and they get sent to locations to get work done. They've got chalkboards off to that side over there that they still write down the job names and who's going over to. So it's just full of so much history. And that map in the back, that huge map, hand painted, so cool. It's got whales and dolphins and penguins painted on it, where the animals would live, and it's just such a cool painting. Super big thank you to Local 16 for sharing this space with us, and to the Marine Firefighters Union for allowing us to use their space as well. But we held our strategy session here to talk about forming unions in video games. And you see my good pal Marissa Bernstall hanging out on the stage. But she was there to talk about her experiences working in video games as a non-union worker, and also her experiences working in animation as a union worker. So while Marissa is an extremely unique person and honestly, just such an inspiration for so many folks, she doesn't have necessarily a unique story about her experiences working in video games, which is why she feels so strongly and passionately about making sure that workers in video games are protected under a union contract, especially a union contract under the IATSE, which is something that she is extremely passionate about because she understands the value of an IA contract as an Animation Guild member. And she's also on their executive board, which means that she is extremely active in her local and has been voted in by membership to represent them on the executive board for the Animation Guild. Either way, we have that video recorded. We recorded this session, so we will be uploading it to this YouTube channel, either with this video or separately. So you can check out all of the wonderful things that she had to say. We also had my good friend Maggie Chrysamut join us as the facilitator for this panel. And she did an incredible job. I just constantly was thinking about my first time facilitating, which was last year at GDC, and I was shaking in my boots, and she was just cool, calm, collected, and did such a great job. And then we also had Calvin Willantis, who is a motion capture technician from 2K Motion Capture up in Petaluma. He joined in to talk about his experiences organizing in video games. And we also had Zeke Alton from SAG AFTRA join us to talk about his experiences in the entertainment sector, as well as in working in video games, and why solidarity amongst unions is so important. It was just such a great, incredible moment, and I'm so proud to have had this discussion off-site from GDC, and I think next year we'll do a much better job of planning it, because this year was kind of crazy. Every year we learn something new, so I hope that next year when we do this again that y'all come out and check it out. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on in the world right now. The world of video games, as well as the world at large. So let's talk about what's going on with SAG-AFTRA. So SAG-AFTRA is still on strike. It's been almost 2 years, if not 2 years, since they went on strike against the major studios in the interactive agreement. But they have, to date, signed over 180 studios to their interim agreement, which provides protections against AI, which is incredible. They're on strike with these major studios, but 180 other studios were like, yes, sign us up because we want your talent. We need y'all, which the interim agreement is different than the interactive agreement. The interim agreement is covering folks in the interim so that people can still use union actors and union labor while the strike is happening. And they're continuing to encourage other developers to sign the agreement. So, you know, if y'all are working at a non-struck developer, I highly encourage you to figure out if you can urge your employer to do so. They're still striking against AI. The employers can't come to an agreement about the language around AI that they're willing to give to SAG-AFTRA, which is so unfortunate because it should be quite simple. You can't use our voices without our permission. You can't store our data and then use it later without our permission, without paying us. I mean, I'm assuming what the language is here because I have not read the contract for good reason. That reason being that these contracts are highly confidential until after they've been ratified. So I'm just making an assumption about what is being argued over here, but like the actors understand that they need this. They need to be protected against AI. Otherwise, these companies are just going to run away with it and never hire them again. And that's their livelihood. That's their money. That's their paychecks. Like, that's their talent. And they should be able to have rightful ownership over it, or at least co-ownership over it, permission over its use, consent over its use, which I think, again, is something that we talk about a lot with game workers, is that, like, we want consent over the things that matter to us. We want consent over AI's usage because that ultimately affects how we do our work and how we do our job. And we don't want our employers to unilaterally just replace us if AI is possible to do so, you know? That's the same thing with subcontracting, because we all know, like, if they could save a penny, they'll cut us with nothing. If that's anything that the last 2 or 3 years of working in games has shown me, is that if it gives their stockholders just an inch of value, they'll take a mile from the workers. But needless to say, SAG-AFTRA is still on strike, still like making great headway with other studios. It's these 9/13. I thought there was 13, but this article says 9. That can't agree that they're still on strike for. So let's talk about this one. Yet again, it seems like this is a common story in like the past 6 months, because there was another game. It was Marvel Rivals that came out that did insanely well. And as soon as it did insanely well, they laid off the workforce. The illusion of free choice, like no matter what you do, you're going to get laid off. Maybe that's the current story, right? I came back with this one, which, there is a free choice here. The free choice is to make sure that you're protected. The free choice is to make sure that if layoffs need to happen, that you're getting severance, that you're getting your health insurance extended until you can find a new job, that your retirement benefits are not just cashed out, and that ultimately you can make it so that, God forbid you do get laid off, it's not as much of a devastating blow as it is to non-union workers. Making sure that we have those protections is something that is going to take time. And it starts with you forming a union at the studio that you're at. I'm sure that those ZeniMax workers are also negotiating around severance and layoff protections. You lose your job, you need to be protected. I think something that people often say to me is that like game workers are contract workers, they just don't know it. And I don't think that's the case for everyone. That's not it's not a one size fits all sort of deal, But I think for a lot of folks, it is the case. You're on a game, the game does well, you get laid off. The game does poorly, you get laid off. But for some folks, like you do have that longevity at a studio. You work there 10, 20 years. But even in those cases, like I remember reading, it was like a LinkedIn post from a worker at Naughty Dog who had gotten laid off, and he had been working there for like 20 years. It was like he was talking about how it was a part of his identity, which is just crushing. That's so sad. And this is something that I think a lot of people fall into, especially when your employer is telling you that you're family and you belong here and you've been such a great employee for so long. Like you feel like this is your place, and then they cut you with nothing, and then you're left to pick up the pieces. It's traumatic. It's trauma, especially when you like identify with a studio like that. And I can relate to that. Like when I worked at Titmouse, I felt like that was my place. I worked there for almost 13 years. I felt like I belonged there, that I was family. Again, I was like a contract worker, so like I would work a show and then I would have like a break, but then I would be brought back for something else. There was never any guarantee of that though. I found out that I was making like $300 to $500 a week less than the men that were on my team, and that's like $15K a year in salary difference at minimum. And of course, like I didn't go to work and be like, hey, you need to pay me more because the men on my team are getting paid more. You have to be delicate, you know what I mean? Like wink, wink. You have to be like, hey, so I believe I'm being underpaid. I believe I deserve a merit raise. But that's what I did. Like they offered me a contract for a new show, and the pay was abysmal. I think they gave me a $25 a week raise, so that's like about 50 cents an hour. And I said, I have extensive experience. At this point, I'd been working in the industry for over 15 years. Titmouse wasn't my only place of work. I asked for a raise based on merit, and I gave them a very specific number, and I thought they would negotiate with me. And they straight up told me that I was not worth that amount of money. And that, again, this is after 10 years working there. And that really fucked me up. I bring all this up to say, when this sort of stuff happens to you, when you get laid off from work, it's devastating. They don't see, like, they always put out these, like, they'll put out this, like, text image on social media to be like, we're so sorry. This is so bad. It's abysmal. We tried everything we could. But, like, work still goes on the next day with those who are left, and you're left to pick up the pieces. So can we make it so that there's less pieces to pick up? Can we make it so that you'll be okay until you find another job? Let's do that. Just went on a long tirade. All because of this cow meme. It did make its rounds on Blue Sky. Again, if you want to follow me on Blue Sky to get all of my hot takes, I don't have that many hot takes, but you can follow me at Chrissy Fometh at Blue Sky. So, I would love to talk to y'all about our latest zine. And kind of go over some general IATSE strategy stuff that I've been talking about a lot lately. So in this zine, which you can download at gameworkers.org/links, you can read all about it. But we modeled it after an old electronic gaming magazine that had like Mortal Kombat on the cover, and it was all about like tips and tricks and like cheat codes and stuff for like beating a game. And I was just like, you know what, this sounds like a great idea for our zine. So this year we kind of went with that motif. So we talk a little bit about who we are right at the top, which again, we are the entertainment union, and video games are entertainment. So we've negotiated tons of contracts for contract workers, for entertainment union workers, for folks who work in animation and film and television, and people who do very similar work to, if not identical work, to what workers in games do. So we've negotiated with a lot of the employers that are also working in games. So like Amazon, Disney, Netflix, Sony, WB. We've negotiated great contracts with those folks, and they're used to us. They know what's up. So what we talked about in the zine is like the roadmap to forming a union. And again, like we're talking about building a national game worker union, a national game worker local. So one local for all of workers in video games, no matter where they work, no matter what state, location, city, town, to standardize practices amongst the industry as a whole. And in order to do that, we have to form unions at studios one at a time. And you're like, damn, Chrissy, like, that's a lot of freaking work. And yeah, it is. You know, if I could just snap my fingers and make this all happen, I would love to. Like, I would love to, like, I dream of Genie this shit and wiggle my nose and make it happen. But ultimately, you know, this has to happen studio by studio so that we can build that local, because we have to make a demand, and making that demand needs massive amount of people on board. And in order to achieve that, if we take it studio by studio and achieve supermajority support at each studio, we build that. If we just take one person from over here and one person from over there, and then maybe 10 people working over here, how are we going to force one employer to negotiate a contract with us if it's a minority of people working across many studios? So building that large game worker movement, it takes time. It takes multiple studios organizing under the IATSE to form that. And, you know, I mention the Animation Guild a lot, but it's a very similar structure to like what we're trying to achieve for games. Like the Animation Guild is now a national local. It's now a national local after decades of being limited to the Los Angeles area. We're starting the Game Worker Local national. It's not going to be a local to an area. When I say local, like people think like, okay, that means an area. No, that means the group. That means the bargaining unit. But again, in order to achieve that, we need multiple studios. It will create standards for the industry as a whole. A rising tide lifts all ships. And many times what union workers achieve in their contracts can get extended to non-union workers. Not all the protections, but like say they negotiate a better health insurance plan. That health insurance plan might be extended to the non-union workforce as well, because it just makes it easier for the employer. Or, you know, they get additional days off. Guess what? The non-union workers get additional days off too. So sometimes that stuff can be extended. Okay, sometimes. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but it creates industry standards. It makes it so that like no matter where you work or who you're working for, you know how much money you should be paid. You know what health insurance plan you're going to get. You know what retirement benefits you're going to get, which is huge. So like, imagine you get a new job, you don't have to change doctors. You get a new job and the coverage is covering all the medication that you need. You're not suddenly finding out that your inhaler is going to cost you $500 or your insulin is going to, you know, bankrupt you. But it creates that industry standard for folks. But we have to build that power by forming unions with a supermajority. That's ultimately what the zine is talking about. Again, you can download this on our website. But it's a long road. There's bumps in it. There's cracks in the pavement. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of things that you got to do. It takes time. First thing you got to do is talk to your coworkers. And I've talked about this so many times. We even have on our YouTube video, or on our YouTube channel, a video of me giving you training, which is what this QR code over here goes to. Training on how to have this conversation with your coworkers. Find someone you trust. Ask them if they have issues at work. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But do they think that you have power in numbers if you come together? Do you think that management will listen to you? And then ask them for their help. Do they want to help you? Step 1 and 2 could be interchangeable here. So you could do step 2 as step 1, or you could do step 1 as step 2. Which step 2 is contacting an organizer, getting in touch with us so that we can help you. We provide all of our resources for free. It's free. Like, you don't have to pay me. I'm not coming as like a guest speaker and you got to pay me like $125 to show up. No, having a dedicated organizer, having the backing of the IATSE behind you, having our legal resources available to you, that is all available to you free of charge as you form your union. So shit happens during the organizing campaign. Well, guess what? Our legal team is here to help. And again, that goes without charge. That is free to you. All you have to do is work with us. That's the deal there. Again, like all that stuff is available to you free of charge. We do not charge a single cent in dues until you ratify your contract, which I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's keep going through the steps and then we'll get to that part. And I'm just so proud of how the zine came out. Marissa Bernstall, who was on our panel, helped me do all the illustrations. She did the majority of the illustrations. I did like the page layouts and stuff. She's an incredible talent, and I'm so thankful for her because this would not have happened without her. So then, after you meet with us, we help you strategize on who to talk to, when to talk to them, how to talk to them. Because this is not easy work, okay? Like, there's some folks that you may find be a struggle to reach or to understand. We have the organizing experience, strategy, and know-how to help you in any scenario. I guarantee any scenario. There is likely not a scenario that you could bring to us that we would not know how to help you solve. But it has to be done by you. You got to do this work. We're here to help, provide the resources, give you the legal backing, but the work has to be done by you and your coworkers. And through this, we build support. And that support can take many shapes. That support can be somebody saying, yes, I will vote yes for a union. Or it could be somebody saying, yes, I'll vote yes for a union, and I want to help you get this job done. So you build a group of people who are ultimately all getting this work done, because many hands make light work, and this work is a lot, okay? But the more people we have, the less work it is, okay? Getting it off the ground, quite honestly, is the hardest part. So once we reach that supermajority support, we file for your union with the National Labor Relations Board. You will sign an authorization card, which if you look right here, this is a legit authorization card. Our authorization cards these days are mostly digital, so it won't really like be a piece of paper that you sign. It'll probably be something online, but you sign that. You and all your coworkers sign that, and then we file it with the National Labor Relations Board. And at that point, your employer has two options. They could voluntarily recognize you or force you to have a National Labor Relations Board election, which we always say that you vote the first time with an authorization card, and then you vote the second time at the booth if they make you. Because you already said yes, and now they're making you say yes again. If they force you to a National Labor Relations Board election, that's typically when they launch an anti-union campaign. And that's why down at the bottom you'll see, remember, tips, threats, interrogations, promises, and surveillance. And they are all illegal under the National Labor Relations Act. So they cannot threaten you with job loss or studio closure or subcontracting all of your work. They cannot interrogate you about any sort of union activity, meaning like who's doing this, who voted yes, who wants to vote yes, who's leading this. They can't promise you anything in exchange for a no vote, meaning like we were going to give you that raise or that promotion and now the union's in the way and we can't do anything. That's illegal. And they also can't spy on you, surveil you. They can't like watch who you're talking to figure out who it is you're talking to or what you're talking about. Like all of a sudden one day you go to work and like HR is suddenly sat next to you. Like, oh yeah, they're just, monitoring. They're just hanging out here for the day. Ultimately, they want to find out what you're talking about. Or, hey, guess what? We're installing all this spyware on your computer so that we can watch who you're talking to when you're not at work if you're a remote worker. All illegal under the National Labor Relations Act. They cannot do that. But anyway, so you go to the booth, you all cast your votes again. You say, yes, I want my union. And if we have that 50+1% vote, then guess what? Congratulations, you won your union. And now we move on to negotiating your first contract. Phase 2. So this is level 1. It's organizing. And level 2 is negotiating your first contract. So again, additional resources. You can always check us out, gameworkers.org/links. I want to give credit where credit is due to Yaron, who designed all of these wonderful, adorable characters. Marissa, who helped greatly with creating the zine, and we proudly had it printed at a union print shop. So now I'm going to talk more about the IA and our strategy. So again, we build power by forming unions with a supermajority. We're not just going about this hard mode because it's hard. We're not doing this because we like doing things the hard way. Like I said, if I could just walk in, snap my fingers, and get y'all a union contract, that would be sick. But that's unfortunately not how the law works, and not the way that we strategize to win. But we have to focus on like workplace by workplace organizing, because that way we can use our leverage to win collective bargaining agreements. And those agreements are ultimately what is going to lead to that national game worker local standard for workers in games across the board. Again, if we're going about this piece by piece, individual by individual, it's less likely to work out that way. But again, our legal support, our organizing staff, solidarity from other IA members and other entertainment unions. Again, you get this whether you win your union or not. This is all free. We ultimately really try to not lose. Our strategy is to not lose. If you lose the vote, so your boss forces you to an election, you lose the vote, you have to wait a full year before you could try again. And in that year, your employer can launch an unmonitored anti-union campaign, and it could sway a lot of people. And, a lot of folks don't necessarily always recover from that. I'm not saying that it doesn't work sometimes. It does. Like, the UAW will sometimes trigger a vote to get people aware of the situation, take the loss and use it as a year to organize. Different unions have different strategies. This is ours. And it works time and time again in animation, entertainment, film, television, which is why it will definitely work for folks in games. And it has worked for folks in games. That's what we achieved at the 2K motion capture stage. We won with 76% support and are now starting to negotiate their first contract. Also, they still have not paid a cent in dues. Dues are reserved for once you ratify your contract, and not a day before that. You don't pay dues until you have a contract that you agree with. We, and when I say we, I mean you, we invite a negotiations committee full of workers to join us at the table to negotiate your contract. This doesn't happen without you. We will negotiate your first contract, and if we bring it back to everybody in the bargaining unit and they disagree with it and they say, no, you need to do better, then we go back to the table and we negotiate more. And you don't pay extra in dues for that. You don't pay extra in dues for any of this. So again, our plan is to build supermajority support and to win voluntary recognition with that supermajority support. So we want numbers so high that your boss is like, holy crap. What's the point in hiring an anti-union lawyer that costs a gajillion dollars a day? We might as well just wave the white flag in that instance and get to negotiating. But we also want to build this local, not just with AAA studios, but AAA, AA, gambling, tabletop, indie studios. Because again, it's creating a standard for the industry. And then with that network of studios, we could build portable benefits like healthcare coverage between jobs, like a pension plan for workers in games, so that you could be protected in times of hiatus or in times of layoff, and, create a sustainable career like so many workers in entertainment have been able to do. As somebody who worked in entertainment as a non-union worker for almost 20 years, it was very hard to go without health insurance between jobs. And honestly, I did not have a retirement savings until I was in my 30s. And that is, part and parcel to living in New York City and being paid low wages, not being able to save for retirement. I will close with this. We're here to help. We want you to have a national game worker local. I am here every day, busting butt, because I believe in this. And I believe that all y'all out there watching this are going to do it. But we got to do it. I've said it a few times now, but I feel like people are waiting for someone else to do it. Someone else is you. If you want this, let's do it. And if you're scared because you don't know how to do it, well, that's why we're here. That's why our organizing team is here to help you. That's why we give you all of our resources, because we want you to win. You can do it. Anyone can do it. If I could do it, you could do it. All right, folks. Until next time, you can check me out next month here. Same YouTube time, which is anytime. Same YouTube channel, same me, different topic, and we will reconvene. But in the meantime, get in touch with us at gameworkers.org, and we'll get started on your union campaign today, because the best time to form a union is today. Best time was yesterday, but today is the second best. All right. Bye. I wanted to share our panel from GDC with y'all and kind of provide some commentary. Look at this beautiful painting in the Marine Firemen's Union's Hall. This is where Local 16 is located on the ground floor, but again, this Union Hall is still used to this day to give work orders to the Marine Firemen's workers. And it's just like such a cool painting. Like, look at all those boats. There's like penguins and whales and fish and all sorts of animals. There's like cows and stuff on it. It's just like, it's so cool. And it's been there for close to 100 years, I want to say. But I don't know that as fact. But here we are in the Marine Firemen's Union Hall to talk about unions and games. So let's roll it.
So my name is Maggie Kreismuth. I am an international rep and organizer for VFX and game workers at the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, also known as the IATSE for short, or IATSE, and also known as the Entertainment Union. But today I will be serving as the facilitator for today's panel, where we will be discussing critical topics related to worker rights, fair labor practices, and the future of union organizing within the game industry. And to talk more about the work that we do here at the IATSE, I'd like to introduce our special guest speaker, the IA International President, Matthew D. Loeb.
Good afternoon. How's everybody? Yeah, this is like the nap hour kind of afternoon slot. Well, make sure you have some pizza. I'm really happy that I'm able to be here and just talk to you for a couple of minutes before you get the lowdown from our folks here who are organizing in gaming, but in many other areas. We're an old union. We were established in 1893. We've seen a lot of ups and downs, be it pandemics and wars and natural disasters and difficult politics. And we're still here, and we're still growing, and we're a strong union because we really come at this from the perspective that everything that we do better together and as a group. And you need only look at not just the long history of agreements that we have, which we do. We have 170,000 members in North America with about 350 local unions, all in entertainment. And gaming is entertainment. But the fact is that, we've survived through that solidarity in this industry, through growing relationships, through training our people, through keeping up with technology and technological change. And we believe that every person has the right to dignity at the workplace. And that may include, for some, a simple voice at the table, for others, benefits to take care of your families, whether it's health coverage or, believe it or not, you will retire someday. and it's important to build that, but it's also important that your employers take responsibility for taking care of their workers in a reasonable, civilized way, and that they provide security that is fair in exchange for what you give them to make the industry successful. So we've had many successes, some very recent successes, you know, in things like visual effects, in animation, in CGI, in post-production. All of these things, you know, are always in motion. We're always organizing, and we do a lot of leveraging because we have relationships with a lot of the employers in the industry. And of course, like everything else these days, there's convergence. And I think that it's reasonable to assume that these very, very large corporations will consolidate and that there will be more interplay between gaming as an entertainment avenue along with some of the more traditional things that we've done. And we have contracts with all the motion picture studios, television networks, and streamers. And you can see Netflix now already is starting to branch out and offering different kinds of entertainment, including gaming. And I think it's also important to know that, you know, when there's a live action insert into a game, we shoot it. You know, we do motion capture work. We have some nexus to the industry already. All this really to say that we think we're positioned well if you have the will, and make no mistake, it will take more than just saying we want it to be better. We have to be active. We have to combine that voice and make it potent. And then we have to use all those other levers that I just talked about, be it relationships, you know, with other companies, or exerting pressure on the industry. And I've seen a lot of things happen that a lot of folks said could never happen. You know, we organize in the southeastern United States where there was a lot of non-union, low-budget movies back in the 90s, and it's all covered, unionized, with good benefits and protections now. And 2 years ago or so, we started bargaining and representing 5,000 administrative people who work in television commercials. And you know, we're getting toward a deal, which I expect will close soon. But the point really is that you have to lock arms. You have to want for your own good and the good of others to take care of each other. You have to give that strength collectively to somebody. And it's frankly, you know, it's a profound thing, but you have to give your voice to somebody to speak on your behalf, on all of your behalf at once, so that that strength is recognized. And the way to do that is to form a strong union and to look around the room and realize that you need help. You need that voice at the table. And I'm not going to tell you what your issues are. You'll tell us what they are. But we need to do a lot of listening and then organizing. And organizing, don't think of it just in the sense of, you know, we're outside walking around with picket signs. I mean organizing a movement toward the successful completion of forming unions in this business. And that means a contract. And that is one thing that we have been able over the years to consistently deliver. Very rarely have we gotten into a situation, and I'm not going to say it never happens, and I'm not going to say it doesn't take a long time sometimes, but when we embark on these things, we never stop, and we almost always get an agreement. And that's an agreement that you participate in, that you put input into, that you ratify and vote on, and then work under. So it's important that you have really that kind of involvement. Look, you deserve it. You are entertainment workers. It can be done. We've seen it happen. And we're open at the IATSE to helping you. This is about helping people. It's about helping families. It's about, you know, raising the quality of life and security for people who work in the business. And you are in the entertainment business. So I hope to see more of you. and I'll be here for a couple days, looking around, learning what I can about your business, and these folks know more than I do. And let me just say that also, we have an alliance with SAG AFTRA, and that happens through a lot of the work that we do, whether it was, the COVID protocols that we did together, talking to each other through negotiations and the strikes. And that also, I think, inures itself to us having a strong chance of succeeding in partnership with other workers in the business. So thank you, and thank you, and I appreciate everybody's time. Be well. Thanks.
So, something I wanted to talk about with what President Loeb said at the very beginning of his speech here. He mentions like the political climate and how the IA has, lived through it all, which, the labor movement is an ongoing thing. It's been over, oh my goodness, it's been over 150 years, I believe, that we've been fighting for our rights on the job. And it will continue to be a thing as we move into the future until, who knows, but we have to continue to fight for our rights, and regardless of the political climate or the economic climate or the changing of industries, we need to ultimately rise to meet that and still find our power. And our power is always our labor. I think I might have said it in the other video, but also, I'll say it again here. I saw a thing that said, like, if a CEO doesn't show up to work for the day, then it's no big deal. Work goes on as usual. But if all the workers don't show up, like, everything comes to a halt. And I think we need to recognize that our power is in our labor, regardless of whether it is at work or in politics. If we all don't want to take it anymore, we don't have to. But we have to be active. We have to do something. That's not to say we just lay down, roll over, and accept it. We have to do something about it. So let's get back to the video.
Okay. Thank you, President Loeb. And we'll get into our panel. First, we're going to go through a round of introductions of our panel guests, starting with Zeke to my left. Please introduce yourself, your title, and labor or organization that you are from.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Zeke Alton. I am an actor. I'm here representing SAG AFTRA. As an actor, I work across the genres, film, television, but mostly video games, because I'm a video game guy. I volunteer at my union. I negotiate, our union negotiates by different genres. So I sit on the 4 major negotiating committees at SAG AFTRA. That is film and television, who went on strike last year, as we all remember, animation, commercials, and most important to me, video games. And we are currently on strike now. We have been on strike since last July on a sole issue, and that is AI regulations and protection. Acting is my second career. In my former life, I was a military acquisitions officer and test pilot, so I have a great deal of experience in contract negotiation systems, design, and organizational structure building. And that's me. It's nice to be here.
Zeke is an amazing person to talk to. He's just so full of information and insights, and I'm honored that he was able to make it and take time away from, being on the negotiations committee for the SAG-AFTRA's interactive media agreement. Honored to have had him here. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Hi, I'm Marissa Bernstell. I am a storyboard artist for television. I am in the Animation Guild, and I'm also on the executive board of the Animation Guild. And what fueled me to be so involved in my union was actually my past career, which was in video games. So I made the switch to animation, and that's when I learned about the union, and I thought, why do video game workers not have these same protections? I'm almost doing the same job, just in a different field. So it fuels me to work hard in my union, and it fuels me to be here today helping talk about this important issue. So thanks.
Marissa is a badass. Marissa has been very active in her local. As she said, she's on the executive board for the Animation Guild, and she is just truly passionate about making sure that game workers get the same type of protections that she gets at the Animation Guild, because she recognizes the stark difference between what she used to do in games and what she now does under a union contract. So again, honored that she was able to make the trek out to come see us, but Marissa's fantastic. Just wanted to add that to her bio.
Hi, y'all. My name's Chrissy Felmuth. I'm an organizer with the IATSE. In my previous life, I was an animator for a studio in New York called Titmouse. We formed our union in 2022, and we were the first United States-based animation studio outside of Los Angeles to form a union. I'm extremely proud of that, but now I'm extremely proud to help folks who are working in video games to form unions at their studios.
Thank you, Zeke, Marissa, and Chrissy. And so I'm going to begin with asking questions. And the first.
Before we go further, I want to say Maggie Kreisemut, who facilitated our panel and is also an organizer with the IATSE, is also an incredible person. She has been a part of the labor movement in visual effects for many, many, many years, back from the days when Rhythm and Hues tried to form a union. And now she has helped folks at Marvel, at Disney, at Lightstorm, and at other studios form unions with the IATSE for visual effects workers. And she's just another amazing, incredible person to have had on this panel. And I'm honored that she was willing to facilitate it, because I know that's also a tough job.
First question will be for you, Zeke. What similarities do you see in those who work in games for SAG-AFTRA and those who work in the industry, in industry entertainment roles?
We are sort of a unique set of workers. I'll point to three things. One, I think there's a great deal of similarity in the issues that we face. For us, of course, predominantly right now, it is AI regulation, but also wages and working conditions, and our working conditions are unique. Number two is that working condition, in that we don't really have so much set workplaces. When you're in the entertainment industry, you work on a project. There are rare instances where you may be a series regular on a TV show or part of a crew on a TV show where you are on that job for some extended period of time. But there are very few places where you go to work at a location, a brick and mortar location, where you work there for a number of years. That creates unique challenges for all of us, because communication is difficult when there's no such thing as a shop steward. And so you sort of have to go to a new work site every month, every week, or particularly for voice actors in video games, every single day.
So I just want to talk a little bit about what Zeke is talking about here with a shop steward, so that y'all might have an understanding of what that is. So when you're working at a union studio, you will appoint somebody to be your shop steward, which is basically somebody who works at your studio as another employee, who is kind of the enforcer of the contract on the ground. Meaning, if you're at work and say you have a grievance, or you like your paycheck wasn't correct or something like that, or there's some sort of break in the contract language, you can go to your union steward and be like, hey, so they're not following the contract here, and I need to be able to do something about it. And that's what your steward is really for, to help you, and to help you with minor contract issues, but also to bring it to the attention of the union, meaning like the broader union, the staff, and legal representation at the IA, to ultimately find a resolution. And what Zeke is talking about with SAG-AFTRA is that, like, SAG-AFTRA is, as individual members going to a job to do that job. It's not like they're working alongside a bunch of people who are also union members and are at a specific studio. Like, you're traveling to different sites to do your job. So therefore, there really isn't a steward in those instances. But that's not to say that, like, they don't have ways for you to ultimately have resolutions to your issues. I'm just saying it's like a different setup. So I just wanted to elaborate on what a steward is.
The last issue that I think that we all face similarly is the concept of secrecy and confidentiality in the work that we do. We are all under some form of NDA. Employers are very, very interested in maintaining the secrecy of their IP because money depends on it. That tends to hamper organizing efforts and worker communication efforts. So those are the things that I see. We spend a lot of time at SAG-AFTRA talking to other unions like the nurses and the teachers and the TSA workers who have brick and mortar places to go and work, and who can have open conversations and share their experiences with each other. And so we've noticed that those are some of the unique aspects that we're having to deal with that are different, but knowing them puts us in a position to get in a place like this and have this conversation so that we can break down those walls and be successful.
That's great. I'm going to hold that thought because we have our fourth guest here who just joined us. So, Calvin, please introduce yourself, your name, title, and the studio that you represent, and why you're here.
My name is Calvin, and I'm a tools engineer at 2K Motion Capture, and I'm a member of our forming union.
All right, and so I'm going to go back to what Zeke was
saying. Calvin, who is currently off camera, I hope it gets fixed because this is pre-recorded. Calvin is a member of the 2K Motion Capture Union up in Petaluma. Was honored to have him join us as well. He is truly passionate about bringing unions to not only his coworkers, but to workers in games around the country, and I'd say even internationally. He is full of knowledge, not only in terms of what he does for work, but also about like his workplace and others' workplaces and the issues that they're all facing. And that is so important when you're talking about somebody who is organizing in a specific space. Knowing the landscape of what you're trying to fight for is truly important, so that you can, again, like we're talking about with a national game worker local, like creating those standards for people to ultimately strive for at their own workplaces, so that we can have a standardization of the industry at large is ultimately a huge undertaking. And his understanding of that and his foresight into the future of how that can happen is truly something to be admired. So excited that he was able to join us as well.
Saying, well, as someone, well, you know, you spoke, we talked about what similarities you share between the two different industries in SAG-AFTRA and just largely the entertainment industry. Now, I'm going to direct this next question to Marissa as somebody who's worked in games and made the transition over to animation. The first industry being, you worked in games. So can you describe some key improvements for you once you moved into a union position at the Animation Guild?
Yeah, there were quite a few key differences. Immediately I noticed there was better pay in the union job that I had and better hours as well. And that had to do with wage minimums, which kind of acts as like the floor, which you can like negotiate from there. When I was in games, I was kind of at the whim of whatever the employer thought I looked experience-wise. A lot of the times they would dismiss some experience or assume I was right out of college. I would get lower rates or lower positions, and with wage minimums, I have more security there. I don't have to wonder if they took advantage of anything or wrote me off somewhere. We all have a pretty reasonable competitive rate that everyone can see, so it's not hiding. You don't have to wonder and find out later that your coworker has a drastically different pay rate than you, even though you're doing the same job. The hours also were a lot different. I did a lot of unpaid overtime. It became pretty normalized at my studios, which were Telltale Games and 2K Games. So when you work overtime in a union job, you get paid. You get paid for it, an extra. So a lot of the times the studios will not ask you to do that because it's expensive. So that was a pretty big difference. The other really key difference was the benefits, specifically health insurance was so drastically different. I work contract jobs as a storyboard artist. I work on TV, so once a season's over, I'm on hiatus. Hopefully there's another season. If not, I go to another studio. Regardless, my health insurance stays the same. Whether I switch studios or I'm on hiatus for 6 months, I'm covered. I don't have to worry about paying for Covered California or something like that because I accrued hours working at these signatory studios. When I worked at 2K, I was a contract worker, specifically so they could strategically lay me off so they wouldn't have to pay me any health insurance or benefits. So
I just want to talk about what Marissa is talking about right now, which is contract work. And oftentimes with contract work in entertainment, and especially in games, employers are using it as a way to get around what Marissa's talking about here, which is like paying your benefits. But chances are you should just be a W-2 full-time employee. They're classifying you as a contractor so that they don't have to give you those benefits, so that they can save some money, and they hope that you don't report them to the Department of Labor, which a lot of people just don't. A lot of people don't report them to the Department of Labor for breaking the law by classifying you as a contractor when you should be a W-2 employee because they want to keep their job, which is valid. Okay, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that that's what y'all should do. What I'm saying is that if you form a union, you are not excluded based on the fact that they labeled you as a contractor. A lot of people understand the law that if you're an independent contractor, you can't form a union, which is true. If you are an independent contractor, you can't form a union at a studio because you're your own business. But they are misclassifying you as an independent contractor when truly you should be a W-2 employee. If they are dictating the hours that you work, if they are telling you that you have to come into the office, if they're dictating the hours that you work and the way that you work and where you work, then you're not an independent contractor. You are an employee. And again, try to use this loophole and hope that you don't get them in trouble, so that they can continue to not pay you benefits. A lot of studios will also do this thing where they like put you on this rotating contractor basis so that they don't, again, get in trouble with the Department of Labor. They'll be like, yeah, you're on this 18-month contract, and then we let you go for 2 months, and then we bring you back, which is just, again, like, it's another way for them to get around paying your health insurance and your benefits because they just want to save money, but like, you should be getting that stuff. So ultimately, if you are a contractor and you're in that sort of situation, and you're working at a game studio, you are an eligible voter, and we would win that case. That's not to say that your employer wouldn't push back on it. They might, but we would win. So I just wanted to elaborate on what Marissa's talking about.
That was a really big, life-changing difference. Other than that, I had a couple, I'll make it quick, but we talked a little bit about it. The security and the accountability that you have with the union, going to a manager or HR on my own in the games industry rarely resulted in anything. It kind of would just wind up being dismissed or at worst noted in a file to come up in a performance review as being a problem person. With a union, I know that if something were to escalate at work or a contract were to be violated, I have representation to back me up, which really gives me a lot of confidence going about my workday. And I find that the work culture is a lot different too. I think the solidarity that we experience in a union, like, we know our power comes from standing together and standing up for each other. I think that trickles down into the work culture. You see less of people maybe sucking up to the company and pushing other people down in order to rise up, because we know the companies need us and together we can, succeed collectively. So those are kind of what I've noticed. That was a lot.
It's very much like building a community, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Of people that you can rely on and for support. And so, Marissa has mentioned improving conditions at the workplace is definitely a big motivating factor for workers at non-union shops. Like Calvin, when you started working at 2K mocap, it was non-union, and you felt there was a need to organize, right? And so what was the turning point for you and your coworkers to decide to organize?
Well, I don't have a particularly ugly story like some of the union's organizers do. I personally was and still have been treated very well by the company. But I've always known that that is temporary, or could be. It's contingent on me being in the good graces of the company. And when I asked around, I found out that not everyone was treated the same that I was. So I think for me, it started to feel possible when I talked to other people and heard about the things that they weren't happy about. And I wanted to feel like we had somewhere to go, they had somewhere to go, and that I would have somewhere to go if there came a time when I needed it. It's like you said, Marissa, like going to HR doesn't necessarily, you can't count on them to have your back because their incentives aren't behind you. So my goal is to build a structure at our company that has the backs of people, even those who might not be in the good graces of management.
I think something interesting, and I believe in the panel I do touch on it later, but like something interesting about Calvin is that like he had, like he said, he had a good at his company, but he recognized two things. One, that his experiences were not everyone's. And two, that they could take that away at any time. That could change. And when we're talking about forming a union with folks, like a lot of people, I feel, especially in games, think, oh, well, you know, not all my coworkers would be on board with this because not all of them have been treated like I have. Number one, you don't know that until you start talking to people, right? But number two, that's not a reason to not, you know? That's not a reason to not want to lock it in as it is. I think we've seen so much over the past few years in video games that, like, times are good and then they're bad. Times are great and then they're bad. But you have to do, like, you can't do something about it after it's too late, you know? We can keep things good. We can do that, but we have to do it now. We can't do it later once it's bad, you know? Once it's gone, it's much harder to get it back when you're just negotiating individually, right? But if you have a collective bargaining agreement, you have a contract, they can't just take it away. They have to have a reason, and they have to negotiate for it. So, you know, if they're like, well, we're going to change the healthcare, well, what are you changing it to, number one? And number two, like, what are we going to get instead of that? If you're changing it, if we can agree to it being changed, it has to be an agreement. Consent. You have consent over your working conditions, which is something that is like a foreign concept to a lot of people because they've never had it before. But imagine that, like, every time your boss is like, we're going to have a meeting about the current way that the workforce is being treated, that they can't just do that without your permission. They have to like confer with you and the union first. Imagine. Wild concept. It's not a wild concept. It's called forming a union, but, you know, back to it.
Yeah, and on that, like, why do you feel that building worker power to collectively bargain for change was a better option than going directly to management as an individual for solutions?
Well, because it's guaranteed. It's something that's, a contract is something that's legally enforceable. I know from talking to people at my company, there are mixed results as to going directly to management or HR. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you really don't, you're never guaranteed anything.
Yeah. And, you know, we touched upon the importance of worker solidarity. But union solidarity is also incredibly powerful for workers in entertainment. So Zeke, do you believe that game workers can benefit from that as well as they form unions?
Absolutely. Look, communication is the lifeblood of any workforce and any union. We know that employers have always used the strategy of separating workers. Now, whether or not you're talking about employees within one specific job space or across an entire industry. So let's take us, the entertainment industry. There are a lot of different unions represented up here. It is in the employer's best interest that we do not talk to each other. If we don't talk to each other, we cannot develop and maintain solidarity, so we can't look out for each other. They're always trying to prevent you from seeing the whole picture, from talking to each other, from comparing notes that may come in the form of a non-compete or an NDA or whatever. Solidarity and sort of interagency communication within unions is what allows us to understand what the actual space is. When it comes down to it, what do you have as a worker? You have the ability to do a thing. An employer can't make that thing without you, and this is regardless of which particular union that you're in. Once you acknowledge that if you don't do the work, the thing doesn't get made, then you realize that when you talk to each other and across the table with each other, that if we stop work, everything stops. That is the basis of what creates worker power and union power. And once we understand that by communicating with each other, then we have that level of solidarity. So that's why these things are so incredibly important, so that we can sit down and go, you're organizing. We didn't know that. You may have questions over at 2K about how to help build your union. Well, our union's been going since the 1930s. We might be able to help, and we'd love to help. And there really isn't a set of NDAs or non-competes that can prevent us. There are ways for us to talk to each other, to create communication, so that our solidarity can help bleed over to your solidarity, and we can stand together with each other.
Before Zeke continues, I want to talk about this NDA thing that he's kind of getting into right now. Under the National Labor Relations Act, you are free to talk about your working conditions with anyone, regardless of whether your NDA says that you can't. So if your NDA specifically says that you cannot share your salary or your working conditions, again, that is against the law. The National Labor Relations Act gives you the ability to do so with anyone. That includes people that work with you, that includes people that work outside of your studio, that includes organizers like myself. You can share that information, and the only person it benefits for you to not share that information is your boss. So, for multiple reasons, like Zeke is talking about with them segregating us, with them separating us, that's why you have a job title. That's why you have a department, so that you only interact with the people in your department that are in your specific rank and file area, so that you don't talk to people outside of it. Because what if you find out somebody who's doing similar work to yours in another department is making twice as much money as you? Then what do you do? Then you get mad. Then you want to do something about it, right? Or if you talk to somebody who's working at another studio doing exactly what you do, they have a different job title. They're a senior level instead of a mid. Why aren't you a senior level? You know? Where's the standardization, right? So again, like what Zeke is talking about here is, and also amongst unions, like we need to collaborate and work together so that we can form massive unions with worker power. And the only way that, and the only downside to that is that your employer will have less leverage. We have more leverage when we work together across unions, because we can communicate, collaborate, and work together to form unions at studios everywhere. Back to it.
So that when you go to the bargaining table, you're armed with the tools to get all of your members in line so that you can do that one thing, which is to say, you don't get to make the thing without me. And in order to make the thing with me, fair wages, safe working conditions.
Yeah, that's great. We talked about community. Now we're talking about communication. So Marissa, this question is for you. As far as the key is communication, and so why is it easier to negotiate when employees already have a union, rather than reacting to one crisis at a time?
Yeah, and I think Zeke kind of touched on this already. Like, it really comes down to your leverage and strategy as an individual, or you and another disgruntled person, versus an entire workforce coming to you with priority issues. On your own, you really just kind of it can be very easy to just be dismissed or tucked away, but it's a matter of losing one or two disgruntled employees versus your entire workforce. It gets the companies to pay attention, it gets them to want to talk, and I really think that without that collective power or a contract that binds them to have that conversation with you, it's going to be really difficult to make any real change in favor for the workers.
Okay. And going back to Calvin with the work that you've done to successfully unionize at your studio, why is it important for everyone on the team, not just in one department or role, but for everyone to join a union?
Well, you have to make a decision about the shape of your unit within the company, and everyone within that unit has to be on board. Because if you don't have unity, if you don't have solidarity, then you don't have anything. So we strive to make everyone feel included in the process and make moves that are reflective of the majority.
It sounds like, when you're organizing, it takes a lot of trust, right? That you have to kind of earn from the workers. And so how do you build that trust?
I try, the same way you build trust with anyone. You have to listen and meet people where they're at and show up in the ways that they ask you to show up. And that's it. At the end of the day, they have to come to you. And you can go to them and do everything you can to include them, but it's each individual's decision in the unit where they stand. And you have to be as transparent and accessible as you can be.
I think what Calvin's kind of alluding to is like leading a horse to water and you can't make him drink. Building trust with your coworkers is such I wouldn't say it's a difficult thing in the majority of the times. Because chances are, like, you and your coworkers likely have a lot of trust amongst each other already. Especially if you know one another, especially if you're working together very closely. But when we're talking about, putting it all on the line to fight for better, that's something that takes a lot of trust in someone. Someone comes up to you and says, I'm starting a movement, I want you to join me. A lot of people aren't just going to blindly follow. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to understand their issues and your own. You have to be able to relate, because ultimately we are of the same class. We are the working class, and we need to have each other's backs so that we can succeed. And so you have to prove that to people by talking to them, listening to them, and having your issues and their issues resonate with both of you. That's how you get people to come together collectively, which I think is something that Calvin is talking about here. Let's go back to it.
What's really key is to listen, right? And be available and open with no judgment, right? Talking to people and hearing them out. And so, Chrissy, what are the steps to organizing?
I'm so glad you asked, because I made a presentation. So y'all probably got a zine that we have up front, and this is really just going to kind of be like a quick overview, like going through each of those steps and kind of elaborating on.
So you can download a copy of our zine for free at gameworkers.org/links. It's available there anytime. So definitely go check it out there, but I'm going to play the presentation from over here.
on them. And you know, this is ultimately what Calvin and his coworkers achieved at 2K, and something that we replicate across motion picture, film, television, animation. This is what worked for organizing at my animation studio as well. But the first step is you got to talk to your coworkers. You got to find out where they're at. What do they think about coming together to form a union? And do they have issues at work? And you know, I think a really important thing that Calvin mentioned about himself is that he's good. You know, he's working there and everything's copacetic for him. But he recognized that not everybody else has the same experience, and that's ultimately what drove him to start motivating himself and his coworkers to come together, right? But the only way you're going to find out if somebody's got issues is if you talk to them. So reaching out to folks and seeing if they'd be down to the idea is like step number one. And then step number two is this can also be step number one, honestly. Like, you could call me tomorrow, I'll be there. But you contact an IA organizer, and we're here to help you strategize on how to talk to your coworkers, how to reach everybody at your studio, because chances are you don't know everyone, right? Like, you might be working in like a hybrid situation, you might be working fully remote, you might be in a department that's completely separated from another. And therefore, we're here to help you figure out how to reach all of those people so that you can ultimately have those conversations and then find out if you have supermajority support. So we aim to achieve a supermajority of support before we move forward with like the official paperwork of filing your union, because ultimately we want to make sure that we win your union. We want to make sure that when we get to the next phase, that we have enough support to win, and to win with, again, like that supermajority, because that ultimately also tells your employer you're not just messing around with 50 plus 1% of us. This is a solid group of us, and if you're denying us, like, you're going to have a serious problem. So once you start building that supermajority support, you know, and again, like, our job as IA reps is to help you every step along the way to strategize and figure out how to do all of that. Then we file for your union. You sign a little authorization card over there. That's like an actual authorization card right there. You'll sign that. Your boss never sees this card. This card goes directly to the National Labor Relations Board, and they ultimately just verify that y'all are actually human beings that exist and work at this company. But they're sent to them. Your boss never finds out that you signed a card. It's quote-unquote anonymous. But then we file a petition with the National Labor Relations Board, and then step 5 is when, oh sweet, my image disappeared. I love Google Slides. So step 5 is filing for voluntarily, your employer can ultimately decide to voluntarily recognize you. And again, if we have that supermajority of support, your employer might be more inclined to voluntarily recognize us as opposed to doing the opposite, which is filing for an election with the National Labor Relations Board. If they file for an election at the National Labor Relations Board, this ultimately gives them about a month to launch an anti-union campaign where they try to talk you out of it. They'll spread a lot of misinformation. They might bring you into meetings. They might call like an all-hands meeting and be like, "You're breaking my heart. Like, we could have just talked about this. Why didn't you just tell me that this was going on?" But they ultimately will try to launch an anti-union campaign on you during this time. But don't forget, under the National Labor Relations Act, you have rights, okay? So TIPS, T-I-P-S, threats, interrogations, promises, and surveillance. Your employer cannot threaten you with job loss or closing your studio or anything else in terms of you forming your union. They can't interrogate you about how you voted or who is it part of the organizing or where do y'all meet for your union meetings. They can't question you about any of your union activity. They can't promise you things in exchange for like a no vote, being like, "Oh yeah, you know, we were about to give you that raise. Like, we were literally going to do it tomorrow, but now we can't because this union thing is in the way and our hands are tied. So, you know, if that just went away, then I could give you that promotion." They also can't spy on you to find out, again, like who's a part of the movement, to find out about union stuff. Like, maybe you're sitting at work, like you're actually physically in office, and all of a sudden they moved like a supervisor or an HR person near you to see who you're talking to and what you're talking about. Or, you know, you're working remotely and they're like, all of a sudden we're installing software to monitor what you're saying to each other. This is all illegal under the National Labor Relations Act. That's the law. And even though We're in these like wild, tumultuous times with the political climate going on. The National Labor Relations Act is still the law of the land. You might hear in the news about like, oh, the NLRB is up in arms and like people are getting fired. The National Labor Relations Act is the law, regardless of whether there's folks in quorum at the National Labor Relations Board. So this is all still the law. And congrats. After that, you file for your union, you win your union election, or you're voluntarily recognized, and you've won your union. It sounds very simple. But at the end of the day, you know, this can take a bunch of time, but we're here to help you. That's our job. Our job is to help y'all. And folks like Calvin are folks that have done it. It's replicable. Like, we can all do this. We just have to take that first step by standing up for ourselves and saying, we're not going to do this anymore. We want to have the ability to negotiate around the things at work that matter the most to us, which is your working conditions, your health insurance benefits, your retirement that you should be able to have. And that's, yeah, I think that's the lesson.
I do have...
Oh, no, wait, sorry. But you can contact us, hit us up at rpg@iatse.net, and we'll get in touch with you. If y'all want to like talk about forming a union at your workplace, we're at booth 1841 the rest of the week. Y'all got a copy of the zine, and if you didn't, they're available on the table right there. But also, we're going to hang out afterwards, too, to ultimately continue this conversation.
I have one last question for you. But before we do that, can you, if you can fill out your top priority that you want to change in the game industries, we'll start collecting that. Bless you. And Chrissy, last question for you. Why is now the time to organize?
Oh man, I love this question. Now is and always has been the time. So we always say in organizing, like, the best time to form a union was yesterday, and the second best time to start forming your union is today. You know, I think it's a broader issue, right? We're talking about a climate in the games industry where there's been a lot of upheaval. There's been so many layoffs. There's a lot of questioning about the future of working in games. There's so many things on the horizon, including like AI, that are threatening a lot of people's work. But in order to make sure that we have job security and that we have a future working in games, the time for us to start asking questions about our coworkers and how they feel about this is, again, it's today. And as I was talking about before, regardless of the current political climate and who's ultimately in charge at the National Labor Relations Board, the National Labor Relations Act is still the law. We are protected to talk freely about forming unions at work and out of work. And we should continue to rely on that. And also, our ability as workers to rescind our labor. That is our ultimate power. They cannot continue to make the games that they make the money that they make without us. I say a lot of the time, and I felt this a lot myself too, because, you know, I have a creative background, like working in what I considered like my dream job, you know, working in animation. Working in games, I feel like for a lot of people is that dream job for them. Like they played games growing up and they always wanted to work in games. They took this on as their career, and they're so stoked and proud to be able to work on video games. And your job is not a gift. You earned it. You deserve it, and you also deserve to be treated with dignity and respect on the job, and ultimately have the protections of a union contract that your employer's not necessarily going to hand over to you. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I always say the time to organize was yesterday, but yeah, but
today's just as good.
yes, today is your moment to do it. So now we're just gonna pull some, there's a lot here. I'm just gonna pull some of the top priorities that some of you want in games.
As we dive into these responses from the audience, I want to say that every single person who filled out a card, your asks are reasonable. Your needs at work are valid, and they're all things that we can address in a union contract. So if you're out there watching this and you're thinking, well, my top priority would be X, Y, or Z, I guarantee that your request would be reasonable and resolvable with a union contract.
And I'm going to turn it over to the panel to kind of address how we can achieve this. So one of the things here is protection for contract workers and more respect for them.
I think Marissa can answer that one, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I did talk about this, but I really significantly had a much better time as a contractor with union protections, specifically with the healthcare, as well as, I'm also accruing hours for a pension and for my retirement. So these are things that a lot of the times in games, they hire you contract specifically so they can deny you these things. And I'm seeing there's a lot more contract jobs in games instead of full-time. So if that's going to be a new norm, you deserve to have protections as a contract worker. So yeah, I agree.
Talked about it again a little earlier in the video, but like, if you're a contract worker, you deserve these things and you're not ineligible. We can work together to fix it, okay? Your employer's not going to do that, but with a union, we can fight it.
I agree, that's a really big priority.
Here's one that one person wrote, union rep in Austin, Texas. Entertainment workers, largely we think of them as, state of California, maybe New York. So I don't know if someone here can address representation nationwide.
So my pal back there, Ben Spade, is in the back. He helped organize an animation studio in Austin, Texas called Powerhouse Animation. So, even in right-to-work states, y'all should still exercise your rights as laborers to form unions. Right-to-work makes it a different challenge, but it's not impossible, and it's certainly something that folks in Austin should strive to achieve.
So right to work laws basically make it so that workers can opt out of a union, which is a way to union bust, really. The biggest thing that your employer will likely push on you when you're talking about forming a union is that you're going to have to pay dues. Your dues go towards the upholding of your contract. Your dues go to the facilitation of your local. And without dues, there's no legal staff with which to uphold the language in the contract. Even with a contract in place, your employer will still likely break it, which is why we have what's called grievance procedures outlined in the contract, which makes it so that if they break the contract, you have a venue in which to fight it. And maybe we could do a whole video on grievance procedures in the future, but it makes it so as it stands now, you go to HR and you say, hey, HR, the boss is treating me like crap. And HR says, cool, thank you for letting us know. And that's the end of it. With a grievance procedure, you go to your steward and you say, hey, the boss is treating me like crap. And the steward says, okay, great, let's file a grievance. And then there's actionable steps that need to be taken with which the grievance itself can be resolved. So step one, usually a discussion between both parties, and it'll usually be a union representative and a representative from management saying, here's the current issue, how do we fix it? If we can't solve it in that way, it gets escalated to a second step, which could be a multitude of things, but ultimately typically all ends in arbitration. And like you're hearing arbitration and you're like, oh my God, they put mandatory arbitration in my contracts and I don't agree with it. Arbitration itself is different than mandatory arbitration. Arbitration means that the union and management select a third-party arbiter, a neutral third-party arbiter, to come in and ultimately rule on the case. Basically, kind of treating it like a court of law. Like evidence is provided, and the arbiter is there to ultimately make a final decision. If a decision cannot be agreed to between the other two steps of the grievance procedure. And in this way, you ultimately have an avenue to which your issues can be resolved. Again, like things like that, the upholding of your contract, it costs money, and that's what your dues go towards. The upholding of your contract so that your contract is enforceable. Without dues, your contract may or may not be enforceable. You'd have to do it on your own, which is ultimately bringing you back to square one. So again, right to work is like a union busting tactic, which is why you see it in majority red states, because Republicans friggin' hate unions. Anyway, back to the video.
Okay. Protection from mass layoffs, protections from AI, and better profit sharing. Can anybody talk about that?
I think maybe Zeke, like you can address the AI stuff, right?
I'll talk a little bit about that and the geographic representation, because I think it's sort of one and the same. I spent this morning on a Zoom call for an hour and a half with British equity actors. They're not in my union. They're not in my country. They're not beholden to U.S. laws. Everything is different over there. But business is now global. And with AI tech bros trying to bring everybody solutions that no one's asking for, we're all faced with the same threat. And that threat includes, well, if you don't do it, I'll go find somebody cheaper who will. And that person may be in another state that's right to work. That person may be in another country who doesn't have the legal protections that you do. And this goes back to what I said before about communicating and solidarity among unions. I'm not a staff member at SAG-AFTRA. I'm an actor. I volunteer there. But I will get on the phone and talk to anybody anywhere in the world to explain what we're doing so they understand the standards that we're putting together so they can do the exact same thing. And when we communicate with each other, we win. What we uncovered was employers are telling us one thing in this country and telling them another thing in another country in an attempt to leverage us against each other to drive us down to who's the cheapest and then select them. You will learn as you continue to organize that there is an employer playbook of all these different things that are very effective that they have used over the last 100 years to separate workers and to spend less on them. And as I said before, communicating amongst each other is the way that you combat that. Record layoffs, right, in the games industry. If you're an independent contractor and a gig worker and they can hire you just to get this little piece out of you and then toss you away, you don't accrue benefits. You have no future. You're just working for the everyday while some person sits at the top sucking all the money up. If you have a union that administers your contract, bargains your contract, enforces your contract, that prevents you from being fired for cause. You can bargain into those agreements reasons why they can fire you and reasons why they cannot. And that's where the protection comes from.
This is really important, which I think is something that a lot of people don't take into consideration or don't really think about before they start forming a union. In almost every situation, you are an at-will employee. And that means that you can leave your job for any reason, but also your boss can fire you for literally any reason. Literally any reason. You showed up to work today and they didn't like the cut of your jib. You're gone. Once you form a union, you are no longer an at-will employee. And in your contract, you can negotiate for what is called just cause. And by just, we mean like just as in justice, not like the adverb. I'm not great with grammar either. Oh my God. So just cause means that they have to have a reason and it has to be justifiable. And you can outline in the contract what those reasons are. You can outline ways in which you can be disciplined, meaning like, so, you know, because ultimately, like, if you're continually breaking the rules, you know, just cause is not necessarily enforceable, right? So, like, you're late for work and your boss says, hey, you better stop being late for work. That is step 1 of the discipline and discharge procedure, is a verbal warning. Step 2 is you get written up. Okay, you're still late. Now we got to document it. So they write you up. Step 3 is a meeting where you sit down with your union rep and management, and it's like, you're still late, dude. Like, you got to show up on time. It's really like your final warning. And then if you continue to be late after that, like, unfortunately, there's the door. You have to leave. People also kind of misinterpret this as like unions protecting lazy workers. And no, we're making sure that people aren't just fired for no reason at all. The point is to make sure that people aren't fired for arbitrary or unjust reasons. Because that way you can secure your future and your career and not worry that like one day you're going to walk in and somebody's going to be like, hey, so today's your last day, pack up your stuff, you know? So just cause is a huge thing for union contracts.
It's really, I talk about this all the time. I'm pretty type A. I'm a pretty alpha dude. I'm a loudmouth. I'm not suing Disney by myself. I'm just not. I don't have the resources, right? But I am an advocate of my union, and my union will go toe-to-toe with any corporation with the NLRB and the NLRA at its back for my benefit and all the people that stand left and right of me. And that's why it's so incredibly vitally important. And right now, in the current administration, it's going to be more and more important. The most important time was yesterday. Yeah, let's get going.
Thank you for that. Now, you know, we are coming down to the last 5 minutes of our hour, but I just wanted to run down, you know, these are really some common things that we all want in every industry, not just in games, but there's one person or a couple of people here who've listed top priorities, and that includes overtime pay, 401k matching or retirement benefits, better severance pay, better health care, less overuse of contract labor. And so, you know, how can we achieve that?
Those are all things that are and have been addressed in many union contracts. And like, again, a contract for you and your coworkers is about you and your coworkers. You know, like we're working with the 2K folks right now to start crafting their proposals, and it's based on their priorities and their desires and their needs for what they want in their contract. No two contracts are going to be the same. Like, we're not just going to plop one down in front of you and be like, here you go, you know? But it's up to you and your coworkers to figure out what's important to you and what you want to see changed at your workplace so that you can ultimately craft that language and make sure that it's something that's addressed in your contract.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to give Calvin the final word in this panel. You know, you have successfully unionized 2K. And what advice do you have for workers who want to start unionizing but don't know how to do it?
I wouldn't say that I have successfully unionized 2K. I would say me and my coworkers are still in the process. We've had a lot of victories. Shout out to my friend Andy, who was a part of that fight. But there's still a long way to go. Yeah, absolutely. I think about a story that you told me last night, Maggie, about how early in your career you were doing what you described as union organizing without knowing that it was union organizing. Do you want to share that story?
Yeah, I mean, I'll briefly, I've been a visual effects artist for 20 years. I've worked at all the major studios as well as small vendor shops. I grew up in a union family. My dad was a union worker at Unite Here. He's a hotel and restaurant worker in New York City for 40 years. Proud 40-year member. In my 20-plus career in entertainment, I've never once been represented by a union. And I've worked my entire career like advocating for one, for visual effects, as well as for my animation workers. And I didn't know that as I was speaking up and advocating for my friends and colleagues at the small studio that we worked at, that I was setting up a union, basically. We gathered every day at lunch and talked about our concerns, and I said, well, what can we do about it? We're gonna have to renegotiate our contract, and how do we do that? We have to withhold our work until we get what it is that we want in order for us to continue working here. And I didn't know that that was what it meant to form a union. And while I did that independently, I didn't know, I knew of IATSE, I just didn't know how to get in, right, as a visual effects worker. I didn't know where to start. And I think because of the work that I've been doing, just publicly advocating, I've written an article about the need to organize the visual effects industry 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, during the Life of Pi controversy and the protests that we had at the Oscar. I was very public about it. And I know that there's a lot of workers who are fearful about being blacklisted, but the more outspoken I was, the more jobs I got. And I think it's because people want to work with other people who are going to advocate for them, who want to raise the standards, right? And so I'm going to turn it back to you, Calvin. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the explanation. I just didn't want to tell your story for you, but what I really admired about what you told me is that you started by reaching out. You weren't thinking about the formal process of unionization necessarily. You were just focused on, I want to get to know my coworkers and what are their issues and how can I help them. And I think at the end of the day, that's the right way to do it. So I would say if you're feeling like unionizing might be the right thing for your studio, I would start by just strengthening your relationships with your coworkers. Get to know them and their issues and what's important in their life, and always center that in all of your decisions.
Yeah. And we have a couple of minutes. If any of you would like to ask a question, you can come up to.
So it was a great panel. Again, everyone had such incredible things to say, including our facilitator, Maggie. She's just such an inspiration, along with everyone else who was there, Marissa and Zeke, and especially Calvin. I hope that this discussion, if you're watching it from home, has inspired you to maybe start talking to your coworkers, maybe reach out to an organizer and get started on your campaign, because it's not going to happen without you. I say it a lot, but I feel like people are always waiting for someone else to do it. And someone else doesn't exist. If this is what you want, if you want to be a part of the change, if you want to change you and your coworkers and everyone in the industry's future, you got to take that step. And it's a big one, you know, it's a big step, but we're here to back you. We're here to help you. You don't have to do it alone, and you won't do it alone by any means. This is about coming together and forming that community that we talked about in the panel. And that is a community of you and your coworkers. That is a community of your workplace and others in the games industry. That's a community of you and other IATSE members and locals and other unions like SAG-AFTRA coming together to fight for better, for the working class at large. So let's go. Let's do it. That's all for this video, part 2 of 1 video. But I will see you again next month. Same channel, same me, different topic. And hopefully maybe we'll be a little bit closer on the campaign at your studio to forming a union at that time. So we'll see. Have a great month, and I'll see you next time. Bye.